ceasefire, we were all holding our collective breath to that November 24th midnight deadline, hoping, like the Israelis were hoping, that there would be no deal, that, you know, which would be a bad deal would be worse. But now we have the situation where we're potentially going on to June or so, and what's going to happen in this time is, in the meantime, we know that there's about $700 million worth there's been you know, some of the blockage of funds that's been relaxed and so on, so that Iran is having access to that. Can they just go along and play the game for another X number of months and keep building their nuclear reactors? What's really happening?
Yeah, well, I think you've, in a certain sense, answered the question in the way that you formulated it. The answer is that there was, I mean, I understand the reason to be with bated breath on November 24th, but there was no real reason to be, because it was very clear that there was no chance of any kind of deal coming out of the talks in Vienna, because the Iranians who were at the talks had no mandate to reach an agreement. On the contrary, there was no desire on the part of the supreme leader and the top leadership in Iran to reach an agreement. What they were about, what they have been clearly about since the beginning, is dragging out the negotiating process, taking any confidence-building concessions they can get and using them, and at the same time, of course, continuing to develop their uranium enrichment program and their ballistic missile program with the intention of, at a certain point, getting to that moment where they can put the two together and create a working military nuclear device. This is as clear as daylight. It's absolutely clear. They hardly make it secret themselves. The fact that we still in the West continue to obfuscate and to not see what's in front of our noses and say, no, well, actually the Iranians may well be willing, if we could just get that elusive meeting point in the center between the, you know, between the 9,000 centrifuges that they demand and the 4,500 that we're willing to continue. We just managed to get them down a little bit. This is all nonsense. This is not seeing the wood for the trees. If anybody thinks they were close to getting an agreement in Vienna because of the trajectory of the negotiations, they're kidding themselves. The Iranians are masters at conducting negotiations of that kind and keeping them going more or less forever, based on an entirely different agenda. Look, the Iranians are able to permit themselves to conduct that strategy in a feeling of complete safety and security because they have concluded, and unfortunately I think they're probably correct in this, they have concluded that there is a chance vanishingly close to zero of any American military response with regard to the Iranian nuclear program, regardless of what they do.
And Israel?
Israel will get to it in a moment. With regard to America, when the Iranians saw President Obama in August 2013 get up in front of the White House and announce that there would be no military action to be taken against Syria in response to its use of chemical weapons by the Assad regime, and this had been a clearly stated red line by the President in the previous April, they understood in that moment with whom they had business, as one says in Hebrew. You know? They knew that from that moment on, they could pretty much do what they wanted. With regard to Israel, the situation is as follows. My sense is that for the immediate future, there's no likelihood of unilateral Israeli military action. But I would imagine that if we were to reach a stage where it would become clear that the Iranians were close to breakout capacity and were in the process of beginning that final run towards creating and testing a military nuclear device, then at that moment, in my view, the possibility of unilateral Israeli military action would come back onto the agenda. But it would be an act of desperation, because it would be an act of the kind which Israel absolutely does not like to do, where we would be entering a possible war situation without the support of a single great or superpower behind us. We would be going against the carefully created diplomatic atmosphere established in recent years, in which there's a diplomatic process, there's negotiations, and we're trying our best to get a deal with the Iranians. And that may well all be nonsense, indeed it is all nonsense. But that's the prevailing international diplomatic climate that both the Europeans and the Americans fervently believe in. Should we, at that moment, feel it necessary to launch an airstrike right into the middle of that, it would be a hugely uncomfortable, hugely difficult stance for a small state to take. I'm no expert in air warfare, but I occasionally speak to those that are, and they tell me also that there are practical difficulties, given the nature of our very, very effective but small air force, in actually undertaking the military action required to substantially degrade, and it will be to substantially degrade, not to destroy, the Iranian nuclear facilities, spread out as they are throughout Iran, and some of them, in particular the Fordow complex that you're probably familiar with, stuck there under a mountain next to Qom. Immensely difficult things to hit. So yes, I wouldn't rule out the possibility at the 11th hour, in a moment of desperation, so to speak, a necessary Israeli strike. But we should do everything in our power to avoid reaching that moment, and to do everything in our power to awaken the West to its duty to effectively respond to this danger, ongoing danger of the Iranian